Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Cryptids and Monsters video. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and do this last one here for this go around and then give this series a brief rest. I counted and I've actually done 15 videos involving Cryptids and Monsters, including some of the Cryptids of the Week type stuff. So yes indeed, lots of good ones, lots of great suggestions that I was able to implement this go around. Thank you so much again. And then I'm going to start focusing on the mysteries and disappearances videos on as the next series here. But yes, this one comes from another entry, in this case a most recent suggestion, the last go around in fact, and it has to do with a fabled snake located there in Japan. I had no idea that this particular snake there that has been around, or legends of it, for such a long time still remains very popular there in Japan. So those of you that happen to be there in Japan now, or maybe have any friends, family members who happen to be there, if you know of this legend, it'd be great to hear what your comments are afterward. But yes, it has to do with this. Obviously, instantly, you'll see that there's a very distinct look to this snake. It's known as the Tsuchinoko. So let's go ahead and let's talk about all the fascinating info, and there is a bunch associated with this fabled creature there in Japan. So what is this Tsuchinoko? Well, again, it is a creature that has been around for a very long time, a snake-like creature there in Japan. When I say a long time, I mean a long time. In fact, some of the earliest known instances happen to coincide with one of the earliest publications there in Japan. Apparently there was some kind of book or some kind of document, something along those lines, called Kojiki, that was created back in the year 712, and in it this creature, this Tsuchinoko, was sighted in there as well. So isn't that amazing? You have something here that goes back to pretty much the oldest known book in existence in Japan, and yet there it is already being chronicled. So obviously, with it being around so long, you would think, would there be more sightings? Well, the unique thing about Japan and where this thing is located is the fact that Japan is heavily condensed, clearly some of the most expensive real estate in the world, but surrounding it is like so much more foresty area. In fact, I was reading that only 10% of the land contains 90% of the population. Everything else is just pure, untouched, let's say forest type area for now. You have to go there to Japan to find this creature, specifically the remote mountains of Honshu and then Shikoku, and then some islands as well by a place called Kyushu Islands. That's apparently where this thing makes its habitats. And then as far as its physical characteristics, at least going from the head, it's just completely a snake, your average type snake. Just a few distinct differences associated with it. For example, there appears to be, sometimes people report a grin that the mouth resembles when it's closed. Other times that there are these horns or something resembling horns that either go above its ears, very tiny ears. I think snakes have very undiscernible ones, but still there. And then other portions of reports are eyes, like these horns are above the eyes of the snake, and they're supposed to be very mesmerizing. When you see this creature out there in Japan and you look at its eyes, snake's eyes are already very captivating, but this one just takes things to a whole other level. I don't know necessarily if they like sparkle or if they have something within them that just makes it so mesmerizing, but from what reports are from people that have seen them in person, the eyes are the first things that stand out. The rest of the body makes up its very unique characteristic. It's only about 2 to 3 feet in length, but unlike snakes, which are usually long and slender, this one is short, stocky, has a very thick girth associated with the rest of its body, and then towards the end, rather than, let's say, ending with a traditional snake-like body where it has a slender tail that goes up to a certain point, an end point, or in some cases even has, of course, those rattlers on them. No, in this case, this one ends, this girth ends suddenly, and then it ends off, or it finishes off with a tiny rat-like tail. So that clearly makes it very different from every other snake out there. Let alone, of course, the girth of this thing, because it's supposed to be much much, much wider than your average snake. But here, it all ends in this little teeny tiny tail of a rat. And in other cases, it's supposed to be split in two, because there's one report that I saw where it seemed like it was a backbone, but it had two of them. So maybe it had two of these tails also there too. Other characteristics on the physical side happen to be its color. It's considered mostly like a mottled black or rust-like color. And then on the bottom, it's supposed to have a very bright color, maybe sometimes orange, yellow, something along those lines there too. Its scales, rather than being tiny like those on a snake, these are supposed to be more large and then prominent. And then the way it attacks is also both similar but slightly different than some ways of traditional snakes. Like, for example, it does bite. It is highly venomous. In fact, it's supposed to be far more potent because of its girth or whatever it has within its body. By the way, that body too in other cases is supposed to be more of a triangle-like shape as opposed to, let's say, long cylindrical. But yes, the way it attacks is, besides biting with very large fangs, it's also supposed to spit its venom out, and it's supposed to be very well, like it doesn't miss whenever it has this spit coming out. It does so obviously as a form of attack or as a form of defense, but you're supposed to steer as clear as you can if you come across one of these things, because this venom, not only is supposed to be poisonous, but it's supposed to be corrosive too. So the idea that this thing hits you and then it starts feeling like acid, where it slowly starts eating away, that should definitely scare others. But despite the fact that this thing has all this powerful stuff associated with it, it's supposed to be more on the lines of a peaceful creature. Those who have, on the rare occasion, seen it, it just simply scutters about. It just goes away as quickly as possible, as opposed to, let's say, trying to outright attack someone. So you do have that on your side. If you do run into this creature, it'll be more scared of you than you will of it. And then one last thing about its physical characteristics is the way that it moves. Besides your average snake going from side to side, you've all seen those snakes do that. I mean, they almost have like a mesmerizing twist and turn associated with their body. This thing, however, is supposed to go in one straight line, and the way it does it is it moves its body up and down, like its spine undulates up and down rather than side to side. I guess the closest you can think of is like, imagine if you took a jump rope and then you just simply laid it out straight and then picked up the jump rope and then put it down in quick succession. You could imagine that roll on the spine of the jump rope as it goes up and down, as it goes across the length of the jump rope. I could totally imagine something like that doing this with regards to this creature. And then an even scarier thing that it's supposed to do is it's supposed to leap in the air, and not just tiny leaps, but leaps of a couple of meters, and it's supposed to even leap within the air itself. Who knows how it does it? Maybe it uses the girth of its body to create a quick, like whip-like fashion, and then use that burst of air behind it when like a whip does that it propels itself even more forward. But that's supposed to be another way that this creature moves about. So scary stuff. And then as a tie-in to the lumberjack hoop snake that I've talked about in the past, this creature is also supposed to use its tiny rat-like tail to bite on it, create like an oval shape of itself, and then that way it can roll away from its location, either going to a prey or escaping, in this case, from something that it perceives as an attacker. And then if you thought if that was the end of its characteristics on the physical side, it does have one other thing associated with it, more on the lines of its vocalizations. This thing is supposed to be, I guess you can kind of call it intelligent. It's enough in the sense that it can pick up sounds around it and then start mimicking them, almost like a parrot, if you will. It's supposed to make these barks, these chirps. It's known to make squeals, snarls, and then growls as well. It's supposed to make grunts, even snores. If you get somewhere close to it and you hear that, then that's coming from this creature. and in a further testament on the most extreme level, it can even use its vocalizations to mimic human voices. In fact, the old legends state that this creature is known as a trickster. Like, it's been able to pick up so much dialogue, I guess the ones that are more older, that this Tsuchinoko then is able to use that vocabulary to mimic enough to just create conversation. Don't know necessarily about that part, but who knows? Because obviously, like, there are ways that animals communicate with each other. Just go outside. If you're out there in the in certain parts of the U.S. where you can hear coyotes conversing with each other in the far distance, I mean, there's languages that are happening between them. We just don't understand it. So if something like this could have that similar type of language, but in this case have vocalization and learn parts of the human language, that's the only way that I can think of that it could do something along these lines. Very unique creature. I mean, all these characteristics tied to it. It definitely stood out when I was reading this when I was reading this Tsuchinoko, including some of the other legends that state that this creature is able to, I guess, confuse travelers that it comes across. It's more like a mischievous type cryptid. It just, if those travelers get lost in the forest, it just makes them more lost. But that's other tales associated with this snake. By the way, speaking of such those instances where people have run into this, there have been some more recent sightings of it too. In fact, in the year 2000, there was a 90-year-old farmer, a guy by the name of Tsuchinoko. He was stating that he was out looking for bamboo shoots when she was able to come across this creature, two of them in fact, and she was able to describe him as having these tails like rats. She knew of them immediately because she in turn knew of the legends of the Tsuchinoko. So when she saw them, she immediately recognized what they were. Cut to a couple of years before that, in 1994, there was another person there, a Kazuka Noda, who was cutting grass there with his wife when he saw the distinct snake out there too. Its thick body, it had its tiny little tail behind it, and there it was, just near its location, but it quickly just scuttered about afterward. There was another person, 82-year-old named Mitsuku Arima, who stated that they were they were near a river when they saw one of these things swimming alongside it. I guess they were able to see the entire creature. Like, whoever this person was, she was able to see it from head to the tip of its tail, and then that way she could in turn see that it's a Tsuchinoko. But by far the biggest thing that told her that it was such a creature was the eyes. In fact, this is her direct quote. She said they were big and round and it looked like they were floating on the water. I've lived here for over 80 years, but I've never seen anything like that in my life, referring to the eyes themselves. And then one last thing involving this Tsuchinoko and all the tales and the legends associated with it. So big are these tales that every now and then there are various towns that offer rewards for anyone able to successfully capture one out there. In fact, I think it was in the early 2000s, there was a reward for 20 million yen if you were able to capture one of them. And in fact, other towns hold annual hunts. They would actually go out on an annual basis out there into the wilderness and then try to find this creature. I think by this point, though, it's more like of a fun thing, and knowing that nobody has ever really caught one to this day, but they do so more than the lines of it's just an annual tradition and it's just become like a fun type of activity. But still, the whole idea is maybe there could be just a chance they do come up with one, even though there has been so far no such luck thereafter. There was even a reward in one other town. I think it was in a place called Itoigawa. And there, it was for 100 million yen in order to capture a live one. But everyone there kind of figured that only a town that would offer something this large was doing so because they knew that nothing could ever be produced. And lo and behold, no one ever caught one, at least as of yet. But who knows if that reward is still outstanding. About the only, I guess, credible evidence that anyone has had with regards to this happens to be that there was a group of people that saw something from a mountain villager, a guy by the name of, well, actually, no, he doesn't have a name. My apologies. apologies. But there was a mountain villager who captured one. I guess he showed it to a group of loggers around that area, but it turns out that he, in other words, captured it, but then he ate it thereafter. So that could have been the one known instance of a real life Tsuchinoko being in the possession of someone. But lo and behold, he ended up actually eating it a couple days thereafter. So who knows exactly why he ended up doing that. Otherwise, there could have been an absolute 100% certainty that yes, the legends of the Tsuchinoko happened to be out there, especially in this case because you had a group of loggers that were able to see this creature from this guy who captured one. So very, very interesting stuff. That's pretty much it. At least everything that I could present that stood out with this legend of the Tsuchinoko out there in Japan. But yes, anybody out there today, anybody living there, having lived there in the past, maybe friends, family members, maybe traveled there as well. If you've heard of this legend and know any more reports, more recent ones that I might have missed, please post those comments below too. This thing is absolutely very famous there in Japan. There's lots of merchandise that have the description of this creature. There's also I guess these food that mimic it in terms of its look. In fact, you're looking at one there too. All of this is done because, interestingly, there in Japan, snakes are not considered evil or scary. Like, they're not considered the end-all be-all when it comes to being some of the worst things to find out there. I guess they're more seen more out as being cute, cuddly, and then a friendlier type creature. So that's the distinction, I guess, between the two cultures and why they have adapted it to being on many more merchandising type stuff as opposed to here where it wouldn't be so long there. But if anyone has any more stuff that they've run about there maybe that you've seen printed with the information of or the images of the Tsuchinoko, that'd be really great to hear too. So alright everybody, thanks again as always, take care.